Agitorium nostrum in nomine Domini. What encyclical are we looking at now?
Diuturnum by Pope Leo on the origin of civil power.
What day and year?
June the 29th, 1881.
And we left off on page 5, paragraph 8. Let's pick this up. But as regards political power, the Church rightly teaches that it comes from God. So political authority is not an invention of human society, which Jean-Jacques Rousseau, one of the think tanks of the French Revolution, that's what he said and promoted. That authority is just a fabrication of man's needs. But no, the authority of the state and authority of the church both come from God. They're the two swords that come from Christ the King. For it finds this clearly testified in the
Sacred Scriptures
and in the monuments of antiquity. Besides, no other doctrine can be conceived which is more agreeable to reason or more in accord with the safety of both princes and peoples. So Catholic doctrine and morals makes the police job a lot easier, makes the men who govern the country a lot easier. It makes their job a lot easier because of the doctrine of the church, the morals, the respect to God. And now with God being erased and no fear of hell, no fear even of capital punishment, there's just no restraints. No restraints. So murders are increasing now. Thefts are very common. The people at the stores tell me, yeah, Father, people steal all the time. But we can't call the police on them. We can't capture them, and because in the long run, you lose more money going through lawsuits. So every store now has to take into account so much of their merchandise will be just stolen. It's just awful. That's how society's become. It's just horrible. 9, paragraph 9, take it please, Andres.
In truth, that the source of human power is in God, the books of the Old Testament in very many places clearly establish. By me kings reign, by me princes rule, and the mighty decree justice.
Go on.
And in another place, give ear, you that rule the people, for power is given you of the Lord, and strength by the Most High. The same thing is contained in the book of Ecclesiasticus. Over every nation he hath set a ruler. These things, however, which they had learned of God, men were little by little untaught through heathen superstition, which even as it has corrupted the true aspect, and often the very concept of things, so also it has corrupted the natural form and the beauty of the chief power. Afterwards, when the Christian gospel shed its light, vanity yielded to truth, and that noble and divine principle, whence all authority flows, began to shine forth. To the Roman governor, ostentatiously pretending that he had the power of releasing and of condemning, our Lord Jesus Christ answered, Thou shouldst not have any power against me, unless it were given thee from above.
Yes, so who is our Lord addressing?
Pontius Pilate.
Yes, so Pontius Pilate thought, well, I can kill you, I can release you. And our Lord says, no, sorry, you can't do anything unless it's given from above. So that means anything. Govern, make laws, punish the wicked. Their authority comes from God, and our Lord is actually supporting this in that very answer. Go on.
And St. Augustine, in explaining this passage, says, Let us learn what he said, which he also taught by his apostle, that there is no power but...
Which also he taught by his apostle, that there
is no power but from God. The faithful voice of the apostles as an echo repeats the doctrine and the precepts of Jesus Christ. The teaching of Paul to the Romans, when subject to the authority of heathen princes, is lofty and full of gravity. There is no power but from God, from which as from its cause he draws this conclusion. The prince is the minister of God.
Yeah, so in other words, in everyone who holds authority, lawful authority, there's a little reflection of God's light, as it were. A reflection of God's authority behind them. And it comes from God. And this is very, very opposed to modern way of thinking. And the modern world is all power of the people. We the people, the people. The voice of the people is the voice of God. All authority comes from the people. But that's just upside down, right? It's completely upside down. 10. Anthony?
The fathers of the church have taken great care to proclaim and propagate this very doctrine in which they had been instructed. Quote, "We do not attribute," end quote, says St. Augustine. Quote, "the power of giving government and empires to any but the true God," end quote. On the same passage, St. John Chrysostom says, quote, "that there are kingdoms and that some rule, while others are subject, and that none of these things is brought about by accident or rashly, is, I say, a work of divine wisdom," end quote. The same truth is testified by St. Gregory the Great, saying, quote, "we confess that power is given from above to emperors and kings," end quote. Verily, the holy doctors have undertaken to illustrate also the same precepts by the natural light of reason in such a way that they must appear to be altogether right and true, even to those who follow reason for their sole guide.
Yes, so the fact that a ruler has their authority from God, does it mean they're not going to make mistakes?
No.
Does it mean they're not going to make dumb judgments?
No.
Does it mean they're always going to be just and maybe not, and sometimes breach justice and charity?
No.
Right? So they're human, just like in the church, they're human. But they're going to answer with a stricter judgment than the average Joe. Right? Presidents, mayors, governors will have a stricter judgment than the average Joe six-pack, so to say. And same in the church. The higher the authority, the more strict the judgment from Christ. So they have to fear and tremble that they not misuse their authority. Right? 11, Michael.
And indeed, nature, or rather God, who is the author of nature, wills that men should live in a civil society, and this is clearly shown both by the faculty of language, the greatest medium of intercourse, and by numerous innate desires of the mind, and the many necessary things, and things of great importance, which men isolated cannot procure, but which they can procure when joined and associated with others. But now, a society can neither exist nor be conceived in which there is no one to govern the wills of individuals, in such a way as to make, as it were, one will out of many, and to impel them rightly and orderly to the common good. Therefore, God has willed that in a civil society there should be some to rule the multitude.
Okay, so God does will authority over the multitude, over society. It's in the nature of things. And Pope Leo was saying here, just the use of language shows this. You speak, you have conversation, you have to deal with, groceries. You have to deal with gas. You have to deal with construction. You have to deal with construction supplies. And that all requires facilitation through speaking. If you can't speak to each other, it'd be pretty difficult, right? So, and that includes texting, ordering online, phone calls, right? And this just shows that man is built to live in society. So even those who try to run away from society and we don't want any people around us, they still have to deal with society. And a lot of these people who, what do they call, they go off to live alone. Well, a lot of them write diaries, they write books, or they put up YouTube videos of their off-the-grid life. But who are they communicating to? Huh?
The people.
Yeah, there still is, they might pretend that they're going to live with no people around them, but they're writing a book for people to read. They're putting out a video of their off-grid life for people to see. Right? So there's always a human communication, always. So there's really no such thing as the perfect hermit. Because even the hermits have to go to confession, have to come in for Mass at least once a year. So there's it's a lie that man is not social. Some are more social than others, but everyone is social. It's part of our nature. Right? So that's what the Pope is saying. This is just built into nature. And you still need you need something to rule, an authority over this. Otherwise it'd just be chaos because of it would descend to chaos and barbarity because of
Original sin.
Yes. Always original sin. Go on, Guadalupe, and this also is a powerful argument. Go on.
That those by whose authority the state is administered must be able so to compel the citizens to obedience. To obedience, that it is clearly a sin in the latter not to obey. But no man has in himself or of himself the power of constraining the free will of others by fetters of authority of this kind.
So what are fetters? Bird feathers? What are fetters?
Restrictions.
Restrictions are chains. Literally, it's chains. So no one can chain up another. So, go on.
This power resides solely in God, the creator and legislator of all things, and it is necessary that those who exercise it should do it as having received it from God. There is one lawgiver and judge who is able to destroy and deliver.
Yes, so if someone is given the position of rank over others, they need to fear and tremble, because God will require a strict account of them. So any sins that go on underneath their authority, they are going to have to answer for. Of course, they can't control the minds and hearts of everybody. That's not what is required, but at least publicly and objectively, they can restrain the disorder of sin, for example, shutting down censoring the internet, for example. All the filth of the internet should be removed, should be inaccessible. Plus, it's a horrible business. You know, it's a degrading business. Think what it does to the women who are in this business of photographing themselves, and it goes all over the world. It just degrades them, and filthy men who want to, spend money and time on this stuff. That degrades both the men and the women. They should just drag each other to hell. So the state should censor this, but they don't. They don't, and that's a great evil. And I'm just giving one example, but birth control, that should be banned from stores and pharmacies and abortion clinics, of course, and that abortion pill, so promoted by Trump and his gang. It's against the law of God. Go on.
And this is clearly seen in every kind of power. That which resides in priests comes from God is so acknowledged that among all nations they are recognized as and called the ministers of God. In like manner, the authority of fathers of families preserves a certain impressed image and form of the authority which is in God, of whom all paternity in heaven and earth is named.
Yeah, that's quoting St. Paul. Go on.
But in this way, different kinds of authority have between them wonderful resemblances, since whatever there is of government and authority, its origin is derived from one and the same Creator and Lord of the world, who is God.
Yes. Did any of you ever see or read the book?
Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies. Yes, thank you. How'd you know? Lord of the Flies. Any of you read or see the movie? There's an old black and white movie, but there's a more colored movie. Yes?
I read it.
Yeah, so the basic message is what? The boys all, in the book, I think they're on a ship. And the ship crashes. And the pilot is wounded. And the boys are most of them survive. And I think they're with an academy, a military school or something like that. In the book, it's a shipwreck. In the movie, it's a plane crash. But there they are, all these boys. The captain ends up dying. So it's all these boys on the island left to themselves. So immediately there's a polarization. The bad leader and the good leader. Jack is the leader of the good guys, the good boys. And he's just using reason. We got to try to find help. We got to send messages, smoke signals. We got to help support each other. We got to survive. The other one, what's his name? Ralph? No, Ralph is the good guy. Jack is the bad guy. The boy. I think it's Ralph is the good boy. Jack is the leader of the bad. And Jack ends up forming his gang. They put on war paint with blood. And they start making spears. They start asserting attacks on Ralph's camp. And Jack starts getting more and more of the boys on his side because it's all based on selfishness, power, and, a pecking order of who gets food. So it's just left with Ralph and Piggy. Piggy is the voice of reason. Piggy is the voice that says, hey, we have to think this out. We have to use sound thinking here. We're going to end up destroying each other. Right? And Piggy is finally killed because he's the voice of reason. He's killed by Jack and his gang. He's talking at the edge of a cliff. Whoever holds the shell, the conch, gets to speak. So there's some order that the boys put in among themselves also. But then Jack and his group of boys throw a huge boulder and it kills the voice of reason. It kills Piggy. And that's what the enemies of Christ are trying to do now to the world. Kill the voice of reason. Shoot them down, assassinate them, censor them off internet to barbarity and chaos. So what happens is it's just Ralph. And they hunt him down. And Ralph has to run for his life. And the movie ends with Ralph. The whole island now is on fire because they're setting fires to smoke out Ralph. And Ralph is running for his life. And he ends up falling on the beach. And the movie ends with there's a Marine Corps, 5 or 6 men who just landed on a helicopter. And they look up and they say, and the Marine officer sees Ralph in the sand and Jack and all his gang coming with spears and half naked and paint all over them. And he says, what is going on here? And that's how the movie ends. Now the book ends something similar, right?
Yeah.
So a rescue team comes and finds the island on fire. But this is what the Pope is talking about. This is what modern society is going to go into unless the authority of the church and the state work together for the common good. And the greatest common good, the universal common good, is what? According,
souls.
yes, that everyone gets to heaven. Now, notice, be careful with the wording. The universal common good of the whole human race is the beatific vision. That is the teaching of St. Thomas Aquinas. It's called the universal common good. And the common good of society in particular is that men have enough wealth to practice virtue. That's the duty of the state, so that men have enough of what they need to live virtuous. So, enough food to eat, enough drink, enough land to till, and to have animals. The state should look to that. That the state should, in the Catholic system, promote everyone owning at least an acre or two for small farms, right? But the evil system of the Synagogue of Satan, the Freemasons, the Judeo-Masons, communism, socialism, it all wants to take private property from the people and put the property in the hands of the few, rich and powerful, who crush the people. And then with that you get, of course, communism. It's all in the hands of the state. So Bishop Williamson once compared capitalism with communism. What's the difference? Both are built on the love of greed and ambition and materialism. Both, capitalism and communism, they're not opposed, they're sisters, because they're built on the same ground. The material life, this world is everything. The difference is communism, the state says, here's the money, here, you get this, you get that, you get that. It distributes according to the state dictates. Or you get nothing, you starve to death. In capitalism, the difference is the government or the powers that be throw the money in the air and say, go for it, boys. So the most talented, the most skilled, the most shrewd get the money in business. So it's open to talent and to succeed materially. But the goal of both is not getting to eternal life. The goal is this world. And that's what's wrong with it. So communism was condemned as intrinsically evil. Capitalism was never condemned as such, as intrinsically evil. Because there's that leeway for virtue. There's that leeway where you can have a businessman who does succeed, but he's also just, he's fair, he treats his workers well, he pays them well. So there is room for virtue in capitalism. But the principles are the same, okay? So this is why the popes are talking about this, right? So realize this is the popes talking about politics and economics. Oh, you can't mix politics, and priests should never talk politics. Well, this is the Pope talking politics. But our politics is the politics of Jesus Christ the King and the teaching of the church and the duty of justice and charity towards our neighbor. So that's where the church is involved, and priests have to be involved, and bishops, to defend the poor, to remind the rich they have a duty to take care of the poor. To remind the poor, don't be jealous of the rich and stir revolution and try to ruin their business and boycott. And don't, you're not rich, you're poor, but be grateful for what you have. And that's the mind of the church. The poor you will always have with you, Christ said. So let's read on. The popes are dealing with these big questions. Where did we leave off?
12.
We have finished 12?
We finished 11, Father. Moving on to paragraph.
Okay. All right, paragraph 12, Gavril.
Those who believe civil society have risen from the free consent of men.
Repeat the sentence. Forgot a word.
Those who believe civil society to have risen from the free consent of men looking for the origin of its authority from the same source, say that each individual has given up something of his right.
Hold on, footnote. Yeah, this is an important point here because this is Jean-Jacques Rousseau's teaching. Oh, here it is. Footnote, page 14 in the middle, number 15. An allusion to the doctrine of the
Social contract.
developed by Jean-Jacques.
Rousseau.
Who?
Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Who is it?
Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
What was his work? Doctrine?
The social contract.
Contract.
What year did he die?
1778.
He was born in 1712. What year did he die?
1778.
What year did he die?
1778.
In fact, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he was murdered. He was killed by the revolution eats its children. He was killed by his own friends of the French Revolution. According to this doctrine, all political power comes to rulers from the...
The people.
This is revolutionary doctrine. And the revolution eats its children. He died chewed up by his own system. So did Diderot and all these think tanks of the French Revolution. Most of them were murdered by their own buddies. Right? So his error, the Pope is saying, there are those that say that civil society has risen from the free consent of men. So everybody agrees to give up some of their rights to make a society and authority. 15, read on.
And that voluntarily every person has put himself into the power of the one man, in whose person the whole of those rights is being centered. But it is a great error not to see what is manifest, that men, as they are not or nomad race, have been created without their own free will for a natural community of life. It is plain, moreover, that the pact which they allege is openly a falsehood and a fiction, and that it has no authority to confer on political power such great force. Dignity and firmness as the safety of the state and the common good of the citizens require. Then only will the government have all those ornaments and guarantees when it is understood to emanate from God as its august and most sacred source.
Yeah, so in other words, all authority doesn't come from the
People.
it comes from,
God.
yes. And Catholic priests have to have this straight. Catholic people have to have this straight. But we've all been affected by the liberal doctrines of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau also denied original sin. He says, the noble savage left to himself is innocent, is sinless. It's like an immaculate conception. Everybody is like born immaculately conceived, which is a total lie and a farce. It's a denial of,
Original sin.
yes. But,
This would be like a denial of your conscience too, because if you could say that they're innocent because they didn't know any better, then
yes.
you're denying that everybody has a conscience.
And there's even a movement that denies that man has free will. Even modern thinkers propose man doesn't have free will. He's just subject to forces of economics, forces of how he's upbringing, whether he was poor, middle class, rich. So, that's why they argue, this prisoner shouldn't be put in prison because he grew up poor, he had no father, and see, all the social circumstances made him into a murderer. So we shouldn't punish him, but put him through psychoanalysis courses. That's the modern world. But that murderer, does he know what's good and bad in his heart?
Yeah.
Of course, because everyone has a conscience. God gave everyone a conscience, which is, the rule of the conscience is do
Unto others what you have.
do
Do good.
good,
And avoid evil.
avoid evil. Do good, avoid evil. That's written in every man's heart. 13, read on. Perrin.
And it is impossible that any should be found not only more true but even more advantageous than this option
Than this opinion.
than this opinion for the authority of the rulers of a state. If it be a certain communication of divine power, will by that very reason immediately inquire a dignity greater than human, not indeed that impious and most
Impious.
and most observed dignity, sometimes desired by heathen emperors when affecting divine honors, but a true and solid one received by a certain divine gift and benefaction, whence it will behoove citizens to submit themselves and to be obedient to rulers as to God, not so much through fear of punishment as through respect for their majesty, nor for the sake of pleasing, but through conscience, as doing their duty, and by...
Yeah, so one man who did his duty, again, St. Thomas More, he did his duty. He was a friend of the king. The King, Henry VIII, had a high regard for St. Thomas More. St. Thomas More always respected the king, always was loyal to him. But when it came to the king demanding St. Thomas More go against the teachings of the church, which won out? Favor to the king or fidelity to the Catholic Church?
Fidelity to the Catholic Church.
Yes, and it cost him his head. And so hateful was Henry VIII, after he beheaded St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher, who were in the same prison. St. John Fisher was on the floor above, St. Thomas More was on the floor below. And they hardly fed St. John Fisher, and he was in a cold tower. So he's really thin already. He's just a skeleton and freezing. They had no blankets for him, nothing. So, and then St. Thomas More, they were both beheaded, I think around the same time. And they didn't even get their own burial place. They were just thrown in a mass grave. So we don't really know where they're buried. But there's some were buried in the London Tower area where the bodies were all thrown. But when they beheaded St. John Fisher, the one bishop that spoke out against the king's schism, the king had his head put up on a spike on the London Bridge. And the Catholic people were coming to touch their handkerchiefs to it to get relics of the blood, first-class relics, right? But what's happening, more and more people came to see the head of St. John Fisher, because after a few days, it looked younger, it looked colorful, it looked cheerful. So his face was actually almost like it was alive. And people were just coming to admire the calm and the handsomeness and the peace of that face. Hanging on a spike on the bridge. So when Henry VIII heard this, he had the head removed and thrown somewhere. So that's a detail that someone told us in England. All right, go on.
And by this means, authority will remain far more firmly seated in its place, for the citizens, perceiving the force of this duty, would necessarily avoid dishonesty and contumacy, because they must be persuaded that they who resist state authority resist the divine will, that they who refuse honor to rulers refuse it to God himself.
Yes. So if Trump really, or any president, any leader, acknowledge God and profess the faith, they earn, just by that fact, a greater respect, a greater honor, and a greater obedience from the people, because most people will happily obey a king or ruler who obeys God. Right? If Trump was seen in the confessional line, or at least known to go to confession, seen at Mass, and a man of prayer, and trying to uphold the laws of God, people would respect him so much more. He'll always have his enemies. Any ruler will always have their enemies, especially when they stand for God. And today, such a ruler would be probably quickly martyred, you know. But but in a healthy society of people, they would respect that authority. Like St. Louis IX, he would be seen sometimes sitting under the oak tree, right in Paris. And people could come up to him and talk. He was seen even taking a nap under a tree once. And the people had such a love and respect for him because they saw he was the anointed of the Lord. The authority comes from God. It just changes the whole atmosphere of how the state is seen, state authority. Doesn't it? We don't know it. We don't know it because we're all in this Jean-Jacques Rousseau world and John Locke world of government by the people, for the people, from the people. 14, Andres.
This doctrine the Apostle Paul particularly inculcated on the Romans, to whom he wrote with so great authority and weight on the reverence to be entertained towards the higher powers, that it seems nothing could be prescribed more weightily. Let every soul be subject to higher powers, for there is no power but from God, and those that are ordained of God. Therefore, he that resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist purchase to themselves damnation. Wherefore, be subject of necessity, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. And in agreement with this is the celebrated declaration of Peter, the prince of the apostles, on the same subject. Be ye subject, therefore, to every human creature for God's sake, whether it be to the king as excelling, or to governors, as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of the good, for so is the will of God.
Yeah, St. Peter's epistle. So obviously, when leaders are in line with God's law and his commandments, it's wonderful. But if they step out of God's commandments and promote, for example, abortion laws, abortion-soaked vaccines, then we have to oppose that. We can't go with that. So when all these governors were enforcing everybody to get vaccinated, stay in their homes, they have no right to do that. They have no right to do that. So they have their limits. The role of their authority has their limits, right? And closing down the churches. And the worst was the cooperation of the American Catholic bishops and all over the world, the bishops cooperating with these criminals and closing down the churches. It just was unthinkable. But apparently the American bishops were given $3 billion to cooperate with the lie. And they did. To their shame, to the scandal of the sheep. 15. Okay, we'll pick up tomorrow. Agitorium nostrum in nomine Domini.